It often seems like the Zen that we talk about in these old stories is impossible for real people. I'm not like that. It seems unattainable. It seems hopelessly countercultural. You probably dismiss it as a realistic possibility without even thinking about it. The basic concern of our school, of we Zen students, is just as relevant today as it was 1800, whatever, 100 years ago when Bodhidharma was alive. We all experience confusion and fear related to this great matter of life-death. The one thing we really know is that we change and weaken and die, and we don't want that. So what about that? It makes just as much sense now in your own life to walk away from the trivialities and to devote your life and your energy and your time to waking up. Good morning. It's nice to see you all. I think by now we're catching on to the idea that today is Bodhidharma Day. Today is the ancestor commemoration day for Bodhidharma, which is good because it gives a clear theme for the talk. And I did want to start with crowdsourcing. What do we know about Bodhidharma? What do we think we know about this fellow? Just shout out whatever stories or features come to mind.
Came from India to China.
Right.
First Zen patriarch.
First Zen patriarch.
Sat for 8 years or so in a room facing the wall.
We usually say 9, but sure, who knows? What else?
Something about his eyelids cutting off and planting tea leaves, something like that.
Exactly. The story goes that Bodhidharma got sleepy at some point sitting in the cave for many years, and to resolve that, he tore his own eyelids off so that he couldn't fall asleep and threw them on the ground, and then where they landed, tea plants sprung up, which is, allegedly where tea came from. Anything else?
They call him the red-haired barbarian. Is that him? Red-faced foreigner or something?
Barbarian, yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes like blue-eyed barbarian. Yeah.
Does he look like that?
Yeah, so this is Hakuin Yasutani Roshi's depiction of Bodhidharma on the right here, and it's a little hard to pick out because it's brown on brown, but the central statue today is Bodhidharma, right below Amida Buddha. Y'all know where else he is always featured in the temple's artwork?
Giant painting above the staircase.
The giant painting of the staircase. Yeah, the huge one. And what is interesting about that painting? What do you see in the painting that's sort of unusual?
He's barefoot, or he's holding one sandal, is that right?
Yeah, exactly. He's holding one sandal and not wearing any shoes. We'll get to that later. So these are the things we think we know about Bodhidharma, and this is just sort of to say historical details about this figure are very scant. Most of the body of, air quotes, what we know about Bodhidharma is almost certainly legend, myth, fiction. And so Bodhidharma as the concept of a person has become sort of a container for various legends. And I think as such, it actually is helpful that we don't know a lot of historical facts about him. We don't know when he was born or where or into what sort of life situation. We don't know really when he died. We don't really know which writings that are attributed to him may actually have been written by him. There's in fact some debate about whether there was such a person at all. Although, I think slim majority of modern historians would say, yes, there was a guy. It's just that we don't know a lot about him, really. And since that's the case, his life is kind of a big question mark. Storytellers, subsequent teachers have the freedom, they have the artistic license to attribute all kinds of stories to him. fill in whatever tales they thought might be appropriate, might be useful to the listener. And I think perhaps ancient people understood maybe a little better than we modern folks tend to, that there are different kinds of truth. And so historical factual truth is not the only kind of truth available on the market. And sometimes it's not even the most important kind of truth. So, I would encourage you to ask yourself, in the big picture here, is it really important to know which day of the week actually Bodhidharma was born? Is it really important to know what color his eyes were? Is it really important to know whether he was born in India or ancient Persia or Nepal? Is it perhaps more important to know the gist of some of the teachings that are associated with him, or more important to know what the impact of the symbolism that is usually associated with him might be? So, basic thing, look at what Bodhidharma's eyes are doing there in the big ink drawing. So this is very typical. Bodhidharma is very often drawn looking up. And it's the same in the statue. You have to get closer to see his eyes on the statue, but he's looking straight up. And you never see eyelids. And why is that? Fictional story aside, what's that supposed to be telling you?
This focus on awakening?
Yes. For one, there's a simple idea that he's always wide awake. His eyes are always wide open. He's never drowsy. He's never sort of half out of it. And for two, the very common inscription on a Zen Bodhidharma drawing is something that translates approximately pointing directly to mind and attaining Buddhahood. So in the artistic depiction, Bodhidharma is looking at his own mind. Like if you plant the mind here at that giant forehead he's got, Bodhidharma is relentlessly examining that mind. And usually he's drawn with the Japanese character for mind turned into the fold of his cloak. So he's usually got one arm sort of up like this and his sleeve is folded down. And so approximately the character for Kokoro is there drawn in the fold of his cloak. So this is the central thing that you see if you know what to look for when you see this Bodhidharma image. Again, I don't know if it really is as important that we ever figure out, did Bodhidharma travel to China by boat or overland? I don't know if it's super important that we ever figure out, was he Persian or Indian? I think better for us to try to receive and retain the spiritual truths that are sort of packaged into this lively mix of stories that we know as Bodhidharma. And I was saying earlier, there are a few scriptural writings that are attributed to Bodhidharma, and there is historical disagreement about which of those really go back to the original Bodhidharma. But I checked the great repository of all human knowledge, Wikipedia. And if you believe Wikipedia, there is in fact only one writing that is really Bodhidharma's writing, which is translated into English as Outline of Practice. And you may have heard this before, but in Red Pine's translation, it's only parts of 3 pages, so we may as well read it. So this is the one thing that we collectively are relatively sure Bodhidharma actually wrote. Outline of Practice. Many roads lead to the path, but basically there are only 2, reason and practice. To enter by reason means to realize the essence through instruction and to believe that all living things share the same true nature, which isn't apparent because it's shrouded by sensation and delusion. Those who turn from delusion back to reality, who meditate on walls, the absence of self and other, the oneness of mortal and sage, and who remain unmoved even by scriptures, are in complete and unspoken agreement with reason. Without moving, without effort, they enter, we say, by reason. To enter by practice refers to 4 all-inclusive practices: suffering injustice, adapting to conditions, seeking nothing, and practicing the Dharma. First, suffering injustice. When those who search for the path encounter adversity, they should think to themselves, in countless ages gone by, I've turned from the essential to the trivial and wandered through all manner of existence, often angry without cause and guilty of numberless transgressions. Now, though I do no wrong, I'm punished by my past. Neither gods nor men can foresee when an evil deed will bear its fruit. I accept it with an open heart and without complaint of injustice. The sutras say, when you meet with adversity, don't be upset, because it makes sense. With such understanding, you're in harmony with reason, and by suffering injustice, you enter the path. Second, adapting to conditions. As mortals, we're ruled by conditions, not by ourselves. All the suffering and joy we experience depend on conditions. If we should be blessed by some great reward, such as fame or fortune, it's the fruit of a seed planted by us in the past. When conditions change, it ends. Why delight in its existence? But while success and failure depend on conditions, the mind neither waxes nor wanes. Those who remain unmoved by the wind of joy silently follow the path. Third, seeking nothing. People of this world are deluded. They are always longing for something, always, in a word, seeking. But the wise wake up. They choose reason over custom. They fix their minds on the sublime and let their bodies change with the seasons. All phenomena are empty. They contain nothing worth desiring. Calamity forever alternates with prosperity. To dwell in the 3 realms is to dwell in a burning house. To have a body is to suffer. Does anyone with a body know peace? Those who understand this detach themselves from all that exists and stop imagining or seeking anything. The sutras say, to seek is to suffer. To seek nothing is bliss. When you seek nothing, you're on the path. Fourth, practicing the Dharma. The Dharma is the truth that all natures are pure. By this truth, all appearances are empty. Defilement and attachment, subject and object, don't exist. The sutras say, the Dharma includes no being because it's free from the impurity of being. And the Dharma includes no self because it's free from the impurity of self. Those wise enough to believe and understand this truth are bound to practice according to the Dharma. And since that which is real includes nothing worth begrudging, they give their body, life, and prosperity in charity without regret, without the vanity of giver, gift, or recipient, and without bias or attachment. And to eliminate impurity, they teach others, but without becoming attached to form. Thus, through their own practice, they're able to help others and glorify the way of enlightenment. And as with charity, they also practice the other virtues. But while practicing the 6 virtues to eliminate delusion, they practice nothing at all. This is what is meant by practicing the Dharma. And that's the entire text. It's interesting to me that the second most prominent ancestor after the Buddha himself left us with only this extremely short teaching and maybe a couple of other texts that are debated. But actually that might be extremely appropriate. The longer I practice, the more I quietly try to reflect on the Dharma in the little moments of life, the more it seems to me that the reality of our situation, the meaning of the teaching is obvious. It's utterly obvious. Basically speaking, out of emptiness, out of Dharma that is not marked by the impurity of form, arises beings, arises humans. And at some point, those beings return to that emptiness, return to that formlessness. And in the middle, there's this whole drama of our lives. But we're born with raw sense perceptions and no sense of self and no agenda, really. We're unencumbered by preferences and concepts, but we have no ability to function. And if you get to watch a newborn baby flail about wildly in response to this dizzying swirl of sense perceptions in front of them, you understand what I mean. And then during our formative years, the mind works vigorously to develop conceptual understanding of the environment and to develop a sense of self-identity and to develop the ability to make these dualistic differentiations between what is desirable and what is undesirable, what is helpful, what is not helpful, what is dangerous, what is not dangerous. And if you have yourself the opportunity to watch a toddler and to have to be ever vigilant watching this toddler because they do not yet understand the concept of burning, but they are tall enough to reach the stove, you know what I mean. That mission of the mind is ever present and urgent. The mind has to learn how to make sense out of any of this conceptually, how to figure out, what is this thing? What is it good for? And is interacting with it going to be nice or not nice? So we come into this separated existence, as Chigan Roshi likes to say. We come into this dualistic world and we have to learn to operate in it. And so we build a sense of self, we build good and bad, we build differentiations and distinctions and concepts. And we need that. All of that is essential for us to do anything and exist, but they also are what generates our suffering. It's so obvious, I think, that sometimes the Buddha's teaching distills down to a tautology. You might say, the first noble truth, that which is undesirable is undesirable. Of course, we ourselves created this concept of desirable and undesirable, and the second we did it, we created suffering. The second we did it, we created the possibility of experiencing the undesirable. And then once the mind has grown up, once you get to this age and it appears from the outside like you're able to function in the world, then the project reverses. Then the project becomes, it is necessary now to be able to return to the original self, your original face before your parents were born. It's necessary to go back and relearn the ability to directly experience this raw, undifferentiated reality without slapping labels on it, without saying, oh, this is good, this is bad. We have to go back. We have to go back to where we came from. We have to learn to come home to the being that we were before we created the self that we think we are. And once we figure out how to go home, how to come back to that, then the real work begins of integrating, the work of learning to use both the left hand and the right hand, learning to use both the absolute and the relative, and to pick out of both baskets gracefully and with lightning speed, to adapt to conditions, as Bodhidharma says. Adapt to conditions as fast as conditions change and as dramatically as conditions change. So I wanted to spend a second talking about one of the core stories of Bodhidharma, this idea that he spent 9 years meditating alone in a cave. Like everything else we think we know about Bodhidharma, maybe this happened. We don't know. But what I want to mention is it seems undoable, right? You hear this grouchy bearded fellow whose eyes are always wide open, spent 9 years by himself sitting in a cave. It often seems like the Zen that we talk about in these old stories is impossible for real people. We all often think, oh, you don't usually think this consciously. Subconsciously, you think, oh, Bodhidharma is some sort of superhuman. Oh, Hakuin is some sort of superhuman. Oh, so-and-so Roshi. I'm not like them. And so you just dismiss the possibility that a real person could do this or would want to do this. It seems unattainable. It seems hopelessly countercultural. And you probably dismiss it as a realistic possibility without even thinking about it. And sometimes, perhaps related to this, we talk about Zen being a tough sell. A new person comes to this practice and they hear things like, well, you learn this discipline and you practice like this without asking a lot of questions for 20 or 30 years. And then you might begin to understand a little bit. And people are like, no thanks. And, one time Chigan Roshi told me that at Mount Baldy, where he did most of his training, the most frequently uttered word was no. And then he went on to say, but if we run our Sangha that way, then we will soon have no people left in the Sangha. And, point well taken. If you spend your whole time trying to push people away, you may eventually succeed. On the other hand, I tend to think that one of the key features of this teaching and this practice is that they're timeless. A long time ago, I read that the reason the noble truths are called the Four Noble Truths is that they are true irrespective of conditions. They are true in all situations. They're true in all times and places. And if these truths are true, if the noble truths are true, the truth has this stubborn, inconvenient feature of remaining the truth, whether anyone believes it or not, whether anyone pays any attention to it or not. And the basic concern of our school, the basic concern of we Zen students, is just as relevant today as it was 1800, 100 years ago when Bodhidharma was alive. We all experience confusion and fear related to this great matter of life-death. We all experience this unease, this tension. We all yearn to see through this fundamental real-life koan, this genjo koan. We all yearn to resolve the unbearable tension at the center of our lives. The one thing we really know is that we change and weaken and die, and we don't want that. So what about that? And I think the fact that that basic issue is at the center of our practice keeps the practice lively and relevant no matter how long humans exist. It makes just as much sense now in your own life to walk away from the trivialities and the tiresome daily requirements of your 9-to-5 job or whatever it is, trying to get ahead, and to devote your life and your energy and your time to waking up, to solving this most important issue. Maybe it takes 9 years sitting, maybe 10, maybe 20, maybe 40. Whatever the number of years, can you measure the relief of breaking through and finally seeing through the haze and finally directly living a life of no more tension, no more confusion, no more underlying angst, no more alienation? Can you really measure that feeling of finally coming home? Speaking of which, there's one more story, one more of the Bodhidharma legends that fits in the talk today. So now we're going back to this giant painting over the staircase. You'll look at it with a fresh perspective after we talk about this. So I wanted to put this story in the talk no matter what, because I have to admit, sheepishly, I didn't know what the reference was. I didn't know what the story was about the one shoe. So I looked it up and now I tell you. Like all the stories about Bodhidharma, every source tells it a little differently. So here's a version that I'm lifting largely from an online thing called Buddha Weekly. Quote, "At that time, the Chinese diplomat Song Yun was headed back to court through a pass in the Pamir Mountains. On his way, he saw the great sage, Bodhidharma, who by now is famous in the area, climbing the pass alone. What struck Song Yun as odd was that the sage walked barefoot on the sharp rocks, his one shoe hanging from a pole on his shoulder. Respectfully, he asked the sage where he was going, and the answer surprised Song Yun. The sage said, 'I'm going home.' This puzzled the diplomat, since Bodhidharma had been in the area for as long as he could remember. When he tried to ask, Bodhidharma just abruptly told Song Yun the reason would be clear once Song Yun arrived at the Shaolin monastery where Bodhidharma had taught. Before he left, he instructed Song Yun to keep the encounter a secret. Of course, diplomats are not known for keeping their mouths shut. As soon as he returned to court, Song Yun told the emperor proudly that he had encountered the great sage in the mountains. The emperor was furious and had the poor diplomat arrested for lying to court. Poor Song Yun found out, as he was hauled away, that Bodhidharma had died 1 week earlier. Screaming and shouting his innocence, Song Yun stood firm on his claims that he had seen Bodhidharma, and the emperor finally ordered the tomb to be opened, even though countless witnesses had seen the sage buried. They found the tomb empty. The only contents were a single shoe. The monks said, "The master has gone back home," and prostrated 3 times. They said for 9 years he remained here and nobody knew him. Carrying a shoe in hand, he went home quietly without ceremony. So, this is who we remember today, the mysterious sage who arose in the land of the Buddha's teaching, traveled to China, sat for 9 years in a cave, left virtually no written teaching, and then showed us how to go home, how to go back to our place of origin, quietly, without ceremony.